of course, as a firm, one thing that we're doing, we're going to be offering this remotely to our past clients, but naturally all seat clients as well. So, the hour is going to go by fast, but we can, after this is over, we can continue to work on this. I'm gonna share my screen so I can share a PowerPoint with all of you. There we go, and I think you have it now. There we go. So the reason for getting together today is it's all about preparation. This is a very difficult time right now that we're going through. Well, first of all, we 3 months ago we had no idea that we were going to be faced with a global pandemic, and look at how this has affected our way of life, our churches, just everything that we do as a society. And then, of course, you couple that with some of the more recent issues that we're facing with protests and riots and things like that. It's really out of the ordinary. So what we wanted to do is put together this workshop really to kind of shore up what churches, I feel, what churches need to be doing in order to make sure that we welcome our congregations back, and we do it in a very deliberate way to help with stewardship. I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges that we're facing right now. And I've been on the telephone with a lot of our clergy clients, just trying to understand what they're going through right now. In my 30 years of working with congregations, the one thing I've always encouraged is to have a very deliberate approach to annual stewardship, which includes pledge cards. And when I grew up, it seemed like our church always asked for pledge cards for annual giving, and it wasn't for any other reason than to just know what the congregation was going to pledge so that the finance committee would know how to budget. Well, we've gotten away from that in many respects, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we're facing right now, is that there's a shortage of these resources because we don't have the actual pledges coming in. People are typically giving when they're at church. Well, as I said, a lot of the rectors that I've been talking with, they may be down 10%, maybe 5%, maybe some are holding steady with pledges. But when it comes to plate offerings, that's dropped significantly. So this is really one of the biggest challenges that is facing our congregations. The inability to worship together. Communications with members are limited. Certainly, many churches are reaching out over the telephone, in addition to video conferencing, video worship services, things like that. But surprisingly, there are a number of churches, I'm sad to say, some pastors, rectors that I know, that really have not gone out as much as they should in communicating. I'm happy to say that some of our seat clients not only have taken this seriously by having their staff reach out to their members, but one of the rectors I spoke to said he makes it a point every day to reach out to 8 to 10 members of the church every day, just to reach out to them and see if they're doing all right. And the greatest thing that has come out of this is that 90% of the respondents are saying, "We are just fine, Father. Tell us how we can help others." That's the sign of a healthy congregation. So,
for a moment, if I might buttress that please. For a moment, some of the work that the Lake Institute of the Indiana University Lilly School of Philanthropy has been doing shows that kind of pastoral relationship is core to this moment, as you were saying. And that's true for the rector, and it is also true for key leaders lay leaders to show a pastoral relationship. I know both of the congregations of which we are in one sense members, my wife and I, one in Indianapolis where I retired and am working as a foundation executive, and the other in a cottage setting that we have. Both of those rectors have called us, and not because I happen to be a clergy person, as have lay people, in order to maintain that pastoral relationship, which is important now, but it also speaks of the very basic nature, the relational nature of the church. So this seems to be buttressed by the research that's going on, where the pastoral relationship has been identified in the Lake Institute work as one of the primary fulcrums for giving at this point of critical importance.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Other challenges that churches have been facing, certainly staffing challenges regarding with remote working or being able to get into the church. And let me also just say, every church that we're working with is in a different place right now. We have some clients that are back to worship, but it's much more limited. Others don't have any idea of when they're going to begin again. So again, the challenges that I'm discussing and sort of the solutions to those, all of that is going to be, it's really in flux with regard to where the church is, how the congregation feels. I think age of the congregation also has something to play with a lot of the challenges as well. And I think preparing for a new normal. Things are not going to be the same, not for a while. And so this is why I think it's a very important, again, we're getting back to stewardship. It's very important that we really focus on a much more deliberate approach to stewardship. Planning for the church opening. And again, every church is going to be different. So we're going to talk about best practices, things that I feel are helpful. These are really best practices that we have employed with all of our campaigns in the past. It's just the way we communicate them, it's going to be different. So identifying current needs of the congregation, I think, is very important. Identifying the interests of the congregation. And this is one of the reasons I want to go back to how important it is that there is good, strong communication. I would not want to be a church leader at a church where we did not reach out to everyone during this troubled times, only to welcome everyone back and everybody asking, gosh, why didn't anybody call me? Why didn't anybody ask if I was okay? So I think identifying the interests of the congregation, finding out what their concerns are, what are those needs, discussing mission and outreach concerns, facility concerns. Many of the churches that we're talking to, their deferred maintenance issues or debt or things like that are not going away. So when the congregation, comes back and fully, these are things that have to still be addressed. Staffing issues, and then also, of course, overall budget concerns. There are 4 main ingredients I feel are successful to any kind of stewardship effort. One is your case for support. For your annual giving, your case for support is essentially laid out in the budget. However, most people don't read the budget, except we may find a lot of people that just kind of flip through to look at salaries. But I think that you're going through the budget needs, that's essentially your case for support. Second is your leadership, making sure that the staff and the vestry, finance committee, everyone is in lockstep with what the needs are and what the solution to those needs are. And again, it can be things, not just paying the bills, the salaries, the utility bills and maintenance, but it's also those other kinds of things that can be a large part of the budget, maintenance and debt servicing. Your constituency is going to be the members of your congregation. And then the last is your proven plan of campaign. Now, as a firm, we're well known as a company that helps churches specifically in stewardship, and it's all based on a plan of campaign that's full-time and on-site and face-to-face. Well, we're really not able to do that today, and most congregations are, they're not meeting, and so we have to look at alterations to that plan of campaign. The first
and
step,
if I may, again,
yes.
Before we go into the steps, say a word,
yes.
Again, I get to be the research geek on this afternoon, perhaps too, to buttress the kind of important technical and adaptive support that Jim is describing. And both the internal generosity, and that has a lot, again, to do with relationship and congregational life. The internal generosity that people feel, that's what's really inculcated in stewardship generally, but is particularly important to evoke at the time of an annual campaign, because the research is showing that stewardship education and reflection based on generosity and giving in that way rather than duty or transactional nature is very important. And then from the congregation, the case for support, as Jim said, cannot be overestimated. Some of the Lilly-funded research in the faith communities today work that has been done not once but 3, and now is ready to be done 4 times, shows that the 2 most important issues relating to health and stewardship of a congregation are if people feel, 1, that the mission of the congregation is clear and communicated, and 2, that the life and pastoral relationships and spiritual life helps, quote, me feel closer to God, end quote. So both of those, out of the 30 years that Jim and his associates have had, but also out of the research that's going on in congregational life, stewardship, and giving right now, what's being described here was important before, but I think it's on steroids now in terms of its importance.
I agree, 100%, Jim. I agree. Thank you. As we get moving, toward any kind of a stewardship effort, we always want to do something to bring the congregation together in terms of an understanding of that case for support. What is it that we're moving toward? What are we being called to do? We always go through, now we call it a readiness assessment, or you can call it a feasibility study. What it is it's an opportunity to create ownership and build enthusiasm with the members of your congregation for the vital ministries that you're providing. And it's not enough, as Jim just said, it's not enough simply to ask people to contribute as a sense of duty, or because this is your family's congregation. This is how, you've been here and they've been here, so you have this obligation. I think it's really important that people do feel an ownership toward the ministries of the church. So you want to involve the entire congregation, not just getting a sampling of what you think people might want to support or get behind or get involved with, or what you feel like they need to know about. Everyone in the congregation should be involved in this. Inform all church members, and essentially that's really going to be walking them through all of the ministries that you're providing. Now, the way that we have traditionally done this, we call it focus group meetings. And for those of you that we've already worked with, including you, Jim, our focus group meetings have all been in a conference room or in a parlor or classroom. It's all been face-to-face, person-to-person. We have found that has been the best practice for decades. However, now we're kind of moving into video conferencing, Zoom, Skype meetings, and also just regular conference calls. But I think the point is, whatever it takes to communicate with the congregation, I think is absolutely vital. There are going to be some individuals that you want to identify specifically and get their involvement, and that be a personal interview or video conferencing. And these are people who may be very influential. They could be your wardens. It could be other large, longtime members, people with influence and affluence, but getting them involved. So this idea of a readiness assessment, and again, we only have an hour, but any of you that want to reach out to me again, please feel free to do so. My cell phone is on my website. You can email us, anything we can do to help. The stewardship campaign leaders, those people that really need to be involved in the campaign, it's essentially going to be your steering committee. Certainly it's going to be the rector, other clergy as well, stewardship chair, spiritual emphasis chair, publicity chair, visitation, the finance chair or your treasurer, and then we've added an IT person, and that's really because we have to, this year in particular, we have to start looking into technology to help with this, getting back to those the Zoom meetings or Skype. Spiritual emphasis committee, I think every year there needs to be a campaign prayer put together. I think that there should be personal video, written testimonials for the newsletter, for the website, all of those things. And of course, inspirational stewardship sermons specifically put together for and specific times for stewardship. The materials that you need to put together, you know, I think often church leaders are reluctant to do too much when it comes to the annual campaign because they don't want to risk everyone thinking that all we talk about is money. So they don't put money into brochures or things like that. But I think there needs to be something that a fact sheet or a brochure, customized pledge card, those kinds of things. I think we always need to have those. It just needs to be well organized and professional. Again, the campaign prayer. I think you want to have messages, letters from the pastor or the rector, annual chair, an explanation of the budget. As I mentioned, most people will look through the budget very quickly. They look for increases, they look at salaries, but they really don't get involved. And I really believe one thing that has really worked out well for us in the past is using a pie chart. A pie chart, two pie charts actually. One that explains how funds come into the church, pledging, loose offering, endowment, rentals, things like that. And then another pie chart to explain how money goes out. What goes into our mission and outreach, staffing, building maintenance, servicing debt, things like that. Those are really great ways to get members of a congregation to understand what the challenges are. An explanation of current and future ministries. And then the right way, again, this is something that we have coined as what we feel is the right way, and that is a deliberate, personalized approach. However, in many cases now, especially this year, it's not going to be the person-to-person meeting in someone's home or over a cup of coffee. It could be. It depends on who's calling, on which members and how they feel about it. But I think, again, the right way really goes into deliberate and personalized, as much as personalized as we can be. It could be, unfortunately, a telephone call, Skype meeting. In certain places in the country, it's still going to be person to person, but I don't think that we can really push it too much this year. The right way, we call it how to ask for the support, and we train people on how to go through this right way. Personalized visits, video conferencing, or the telephone. We think it's important that anyone that is going to be participating in your annual campaign make their own pledge first. Very important. Know the story, tell the story. Know the materials, what the challenges are, what the needs are, and be deliberate in terms of what we're asking members to do, whether it's going out and visiting others and sharing that they're supporting the church, and if they've made increases, why they're supporting it, why they've increased. I think this is really going to be key. And I'll explain, I'll just say, a lot of the churches that we are working with right now, in their own communities, their own members are being approached by other entities. I'm in Northern Virginia right now, and in one of our projects in Arlington, Virginia, members there have already been approached by the Red Cross campaign, by a hospital campaign. So if we are not doing this, if we don't feel strong enough to go to our members and say, look, we really need to support our ministries, somebody else is going to ask them. And sadly, Christians have a desire to be giving, and they will give. We want to personalize the needs, identify this with the prospects, allow visitors to select prospective donors. I think it's very important that anyone who wants to work on the campaign get to select who they want to call on. Very important. People are much better visitors when they are asked, when they can call on the people that they feel comfortable with. The personal approach, I keep talking about the personal visits. I still think that that's the best approach, but we have to be flexible. So getting back to the videos, telephones, setting up a date and a time, I think 15 to 20 minutes to share what the stewardship needs are. I think that it can be very helpful. And then respectfully deliver the message, answer questions that they may have, ask the members for prayerfully considered support, and specifically ask them for financial support. I'm going to take this just a step further and mention that there was one parish that we'd worked with, and they really wanted to ratchet up their annual giving. And so in addition to doing all of these things and asking people for their what they felt they would like to pledge, hopefully they were tithing, but there was a parish that wanted to ask for specific amounts for annual giving. Not only did they do it, it went over very well, and they had a 40% increase in just that year's annual giving. It's not for every parish, but that was one where the rector felt driven to ask for specific amounts. So we did, and it worked out very well. How and why? I'm sorry.
The rector's role is very important at this. One of the things that during my years of ministry in a variety of settings, but particularly as the rector of a parish, it is not just a parallel relationship to a capital campaign or to annual giving and stewardship work. It really is the rector's role to occasionally be with someone else or alone and talk about the giving with an individual. That's part of the pastoral responsibility and joy for the rector of a congregation. And one of the things, Jim, that your firm helped us to do both in our annual campaign and in a capital campaign was to make that even more fully understood. But again, some of the work that has been done in a couple of the Lilly Endowment initiatives relating over the years to research about how clergy are sometimes ambivalent about stewardship, about their own financial history, has made it so that the in sync nature of the rector's role needs to be something that can be examined and thought about and seen as a great potential for a pastoral ministry.
Absolutely. Well, and Jim, you were so good in the campaign that we worked on. I think that rectors can be very reluctant to do this, and in some denominations, we have clergy that don't want to know anything about the annual capital, what people give, who gives, why they give, anything. And I think that can be a mistake, because I think that our clergy, I think that they need to know, because I think that that's the first indication that there's a problem. Either somebody's loss of job, Jim?
Yes, absolutely. It's a great pastoral indicator of opportunity and need.
How and why stewardship efforts are successful? Strong and committed leaders, maintaining a campaign schedule. Now, in the past, campaigns have traditionally gone on in the fall, and a letter may go out with a pledge card asking everyone to please give. I really think, though, in these times, there must be more emphasis on planning, preparation, engagement with the congregation. I think all of that is absolutely crucial now. As I said, we're putting this plan together for our existing clients. We're looking at probably a 2 or 3 month of work to make sure that we do the best we possibly can. And I also think, while we look at a schedule typically going in October, November, I think that's too late this year. Without getting into it too much, I think when you look at where we are with the virus and the potential of a second wave that could come in the fall, we could be in lockdown again. And so I really think that there must be a much more deliberate approach beginning this summer in all parishes. Jim, do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. I mean, there's so much
that seems to be being postponed even till after a vaccine, and that can't be stewardship in the life of our congregations or the spiritual life and generosity of people who want to give and who, Jim, as you said earlier, and the foundation of which I'm president is an arts foundation. Arts organizations are in a pickle. I mean, you know, it's knowing when they're going to return and the like, but they are being very successful at maintaining their donor relations and asking people to give, or to, if performances weren't able to take place, for that to become a gifting opportunity as well. So this is not the time to wait till after the vaccine to think about how we do that spiritual work of and that mission work of stewardship.
I agree 100%. Along the lines with the schedule, I believe that there needs to be weekly committee communications and meetings, you know, when that's appropriate. But I think that the stewardship committee, they really need to put together the schedule, adhere to that schedule, and the way that you do it is by frequent meetings, sitting and going over what do we need to do this week or this month, and then focus on those. Adhere to the responsibilities of the campaign. I believe, Jim, I know you will agree with me on this, but all families, all church members should be treated equally in anything that we do, including stewardship and communications. So often I hear, sadly, church leaders saying, you know, it's always the same people that are always giving or pledging. And I think we really need to reach out more and again, become much more deliberate in terms of finding out what people's intentions are. Focus on selected individuals and boldly schedule personal visits when you can do it. And if it's not a personal visit, then maybe it's a Zoom. Some people may not want to do Zooms, and it's a telephone call. You know, even 30 years ago, we pushed the personal visits, but you know, sadly, we had people that were in Europe or traveling around the country, and what did we do? We talked to them on the telephone because we wanted to get their pledge in, before a kickoff event or before the end of a campaign. So we're going to have to rely on all these things. And my entire firm got together talking about this last week, and the key word that came up from one of our consultants is flexibility. We have to be very flexible. We have to be deliberate in making sure that we get the annual stewardship campaigns done, run them professionally, but be very flexible to make sure that we can engage everyone in the congregation as best we can. All families should be personally visited or reach out to. Leaders must lead. The top 20% of leaders typically commit first in any kind of a campaign. It's a great springboard to say, we've already gotten, the vestry pledged, the finance committee pledged, the wardens pledged. Larger potential donors typically are visited first because you want to secure those pledges so that you can start announcing where you are in the campaign as you go along. Focus on achieving 100% participation. Again, I think that if there's been no other explanation, no better example of why we need to get pledges, I think it's crucial now that we look for 100% participation in pledging. And even if those pledges, if the pledge happens to be an email that says, yes, I will maintain my level of giving, or put me down for a 5% increase, I think we have to be flexible, accept that, and make sure that we send them a confirmation just to make sure that we have that. We cannot forget new members, and electronic giving is such an important part today of churches giving. Now, some do, and others don't. Molly and I, my wife and I, we have been participating in electronic giving to our church now probably 10 years, 12 years maybe when it started, and we never think about it again. I mean, and I think the more you can do that, the better for the sake of the church and the church's finance. Something else, I just wanted to throw this out there because, a lot of you, we've worked with you on capital campaigns, and there are needs that are out there. There's there's this thought that you have to keep these separate. But if you have a capital improvement, if you have something that absolutely must be done and taken care of, whether it's a leaking roof or the HVAC system, don't be afraid to combine them both together. I've written a book on this, and we've dedicated a chapter to combining these two together. And specifically, you can do them. You just need 2 separate pledge cards, and a capital campaign is going to be multi-year. Annual stewardship is going to be for 1 year. So you can combine them together, but I wouldn't combine them into one pledge card. I can answer questions about that later if you want. But the schedule will determine if it's possible. It can be highly successful if conducted properly. When we run a capital campaign and we add the annual, we typically see a 10 to 15% increase minimum in there in the annual. And of course, we're known for 5 times annual giving minimum with our capital campaigns. So you can run them together. Now, all of this is based on the way we typically do things. So the world has changed, and again, flexibility is going to be key. It is important to make specific requests to people, and it must be above and beyond their annual giving. The biggest concern about combining these is that people take money away from their annual giving, give it to the capital, and churches don't need that, especially today. There we go. I was very concerned about going through an hour. So okay, we've got 20 minutes. We can open this up for questions. All of the difficult questions we're going to give to Jim Lemler, and all the easy ones I'll answer.
It's good that we're both named Jim.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Also, while questions are coming in, some of the learning that's going on that I would encourage comes both from the Philanthropy Roundtable, which is looking at American giving and how important we churches become sort of laboratories of generosity, because their research shows that as we've become, in fact, they named it less God, less giving, as we have become less
churched or religious institution society, that giving has decreased. While last year we maintain a level giving across American society in the annual giving that was done over the last 5 years, the number of donors has decreased precipitously in America. And this may be a moment to bring about the question of relationship and generosity in that way. So the Philanthropy Roundtable has done some good work on that. And Black Baud, B-A-U-D, Black Baud, which is known for fundraising resources and the like, has done great work both on the next generation of givers and on high income givers. And both of those are very useful as well at this time when we're thinking of people's identities and where they are generationally and in terms of their capacities.
Good, good. I'm looking at some of these, some of the questions here. We have one. I don't disagree with about the good work of making phone contacts, but as sole priest at a minimally pastoral sized congregation, I'm very overworked right now. I'm counting on lay leadership to make regular contacts. You know, I really think that it's absolutely crucial that lay leaders take ownership of this. You know, and again, I'm going to say, especially during this time when we have clergy that are just taxed in so many different directions. There's so much anxiety, loss, health concerns, loss of employment. So my recommendation is find a key person to head up the annual campaign, and then let that person do the recruiting of people that will help. That will free up the rector. Jim, do you go along with that?
Yes, and I think it's very important, and this is in terms of congregational leadership generally, and particularly in stewardship work, that the rector, wardens, other key leaders really see themselves as the ministry team for the mission and for the generosity of a congregation. And it doesn't mean the rector has to do everything or can do everything. The rector needs to be involved, but this really is team work and needs to be the building of a team for that purpose, which can last on into really what is a multi-year endeavor.
I'm just going through some of these other questions and thoughts about telephone trees and how important it is, not only the rector being involved in this, but also the vestry and other volunteers. So certainly appreciate that. Yeah, the pie charts, somebody put in there about the pie charts. We started using those pie charts years ago because I just thought that it was one of the easiest ways for me to understand. And I thought, gosh, you know, if I need that kind of help. I think it's very good, you know, to have that in there as an explanation. Jim, are you also seeing these?
Well, I think that any means of interpretation, as you say, one of the least effective means of interpretation is just,
you know, flatly having the budget there in the form that you see it every month at the vestry meeting. What's really important is, and it goes, you know, kind of under the term of narrative budget now, of making sure that the interpretation of how resources are used is related to the mission and the narrative of mission for the congregation. And I too love pie charts as a way of then making that very, very clear what the proportion of that is. And for endowed congregations, having been part of SEEP, in the old days we used to call it the consortium, but now it is SEEP, since its inception, the importance of also making sure that the way in which endowment resources are interpreted actually has impact on the annual giving too, because that was one way in one of the parishes I served, not in Greenwich, but previously in my ministry, which had a very substantial endowment. Seeing the proportion in that pie chart allowed congregants to understand that they needed to assume more of the giving responsibility and not let the endowment assume all of that responsibility.
I see another question specifically about the concept of asking for specific amounts in the annual. I assume X number of gifts at certain dollar amount. Is that right? Yes, it is. What we did in one of the parishes is we went over the budget with everyone and we got everyone's feedback in terms of what they wanted to see us do, what they wanted to see us accomplish in terms of adding staff, and then just a lot of other ministry needs. And it was overwhelmingly supportive. So what we did is we simply went to a lot of the larger prospective donors first and asked them if they would kind of set the pattern in giving. And I think many of those people were giving maybe 20-25% increases. And it really kind of trickled down through the entire congregation where then there were people that were doubling and tripling what they were normally giving. And they said they had no problem with it. I can absolutely do that. I've just never been asked. And that's how one church did see a 40% increase. And that's something that we're focusing on right now as a firm to kind of, you know, offer this kind of hand-holding with churches this year. But again, it's all going to be flexible. Some parishes really would like to do that, and others may not. Another question about running. Oh, I'm sorry, Jim.
And it's one of those things where sometimes almost like a capital project nature appears in the midst of that annual giving. I know one SEEP congregation where a very generous donor heard the vision of a significantly expanded youth ministry and the expense involved with that, and gave the annual generous gift, but also gave a $250,000 gift in order to allow that to happen over a 3 to 4 year period, so that it then could be supported by the generosity of the whole congregation. And there are a lot of stories woven into the lore of SEEP of that kind of response. But as Jim said, it ought to be, put in neo-Gothic golden letters. You have to ask.
Yeah, that's right. that is right. That's right. And that kind of leads me. Let me. There was another question here. Closing the gap on a recent capital campaign. Can this be included? Absolutely. I'm a firm believer. I think you can run those those different concerns or asks together at one time. As a matter of fact, I think that some people are grateful that they're only being asked one time rather than several times. The other thing here, going along with what Jim just said about you have to ask, do you have best practices to share in order to drive 100% participation? What's really interesting about participation is when you look at the way we typically ask members of the church to participate, often it is just a letter with a pledge card in it. Maybe there's a follow-up telephone call, but most people are not hesitant to pledge or to at least let the church know what their intentions are. They're not opposed to that. They just don't think it's important. And I know that because it's happened to me before, where there have been causes that I thought, I really need to support them. I get a pledge card, I put it on my desk, something gets put on top of it, or in years past, the nanny moves it, or somebody throws it in the garbage can, and I don't think about it. I think, well, you know what, if they write me again, I'll fill one out. I think, again, as I mentioned, being deliberate, I think that no matter what we have to do, maybe you send them a pledge card, you talk with them over the telephone, have a Zoom. I think you really need to get into even an email, a brief email. If I was charged with visiting, say 10 people, I would do everything I could to make sure that I got those pledges secured. Whether it's a signed pledge card because I see them regularly or they're a friend of mine, or if I have to email them and just say, can we count on you for last year's commitment? I mean, there aren't that many people that just say, in my experience, there aren't that many that just say, I'm opposed to pledging. I'm against it. There are some people, but there aren't that many. So I think we just have to kind of push it a little bit with people. And most people laugh about it. Oh gosh, Jim, sorry, I forgot that, but I'll get it to you as soon as possible. Or yes, just count. I'll give you the same as we pledged last year. Then have the treasurer send a confirmation letter out. Jim, you had mentioned a resource right before referring to Blackbaud, and they missed it. Could you repeat that?
Yes, the Philanthropy Roundtable. I might say, and actually, miraculously, I know a lot of you were praying, but our internet just came back on. So that's a good thing, and I'll give you my email address too. Being full-time in the world of foundations now, there's so much good work that is being done in the philanthropic community to learn about American religion and American religious giving generally. And the Philanthropy Roundtable, I would urge everyone to read the essay, Less God, Less Giving. Now, some people from the Lake Institute feel that it's a bit overstated, but, I mean, several of us, I presume, on this phone call are preachers, so we know what it is to overstate something, and that's important. But it really, the research part of it shows very clearly that this, even before COVID, even before our present societal moment, we need to claim the higher ground of interpreting generosity, God's generosity, and the opportunity of human generosity, and how we as the church and our mission are excellent stewards of that and assist in the spiritual life. So it's a Philanthropy Roundtable, Less God, Less Giving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There have been some questions about also adding in with the letter or whatever the communication is, what people have pledged over the last 3 years. I think that's a great idea. I really do.
It's
I think
really
putting that out there, I think can be, yep. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, that is very, very helpful because they can see patterns. And, you know, I think we have become more faithful and sophisticated in terms of our interpretation of stewardship in the life of the church. But especially among larger congregations, it's kind of easy to get lost in the shuffle. And I know that when we have done that in settings where I've been, and people are aware of, you know, in the stark right there in front of them in print, is the amount they have given to this institution that they value so much and expresses their faith, and that it hasn't grown for 3 or 4 years. That's a moment of some conversion too. And so I think that's a very helpful tool in this. And one of the great things, Jim, that you and your firm have done is to come up with a whole quiver full of tools and arrows for this work, and they need to be used, and they really enhance things.
Thank you, Jim. There's another question here that I want you to answer specifically, because I think you have much more experience about this than I do. What percentage of income do you recommend come from the endowment over pledging?
Well, and I take it that means endowment for the as part of a parish operations budget.
Mm-hmm, I would think.
That's what I would think. Yeah, I think that is part of the spiritual discipline. In Indianapolis, where I live now and where I served for 20 years before being gone for 20 years in various ministries, and I think I may be the last living Episcopal priest to remember Eli Lilly. In fact, he was 94 when I was 24 as the junior canon at the cathedral. But when he made these large gifts to 3 congregations in Indianapolis, I know the congregation I served, we worked very hard to treat it almost as an independent foundation, where a certain amount did go for operations, but the larger amount of income went to the day school that we operated, to various capital projects, to outreach ministries and a grants program. And I think that that's one good way to approach that. There are the difficulty, maybe I should put it in terms of the difficulty. The difficulty is, again, to use very old seat images and language, what we called years ago the bullion in the basement syndrome, which is believing that endowed parishes have bricks of gold bullion down in the basement, that when they need something, they just go shave a little bit off. And that's not a planning process, but what is important in an endowed congregation is to constantly look at how every resource buttresses the budget and the mission that the budget allows, and that it's very mission oriented in that way. So there's not one appropriate percentage, but if there is an increased and growing dependence on endowment, and seeing that the giving and generosity of individuals is decreasing, then that's a point of analysis and intervention, to use kind of adaptive leadership language. I hope that's helpful.
Good. There are so many questions on here, and I know we're going to be running out of time. But again, this is going to be recorded, and we're available to help any way that we can. So if other questions come up, you want anything, we're always here to help. This is a very unique year, so we may not be able to get to everyone's questions. Let's see. Nancy asked, how do you identify larger givers? You know, it's interesting. I have always found that the members of the church that typically know who has resources and who doesn't. I mean, typically they're friends, they're colleagues, they're business associates. They see that this person supported something at the hospital. I think your larger prospective donors, typically the members do. When we run a capital campaign, we will ask people who are among the larger 10% potential donors. And if you only ask that, and you have 10 or 15 people, not even 10, 6 or 8 people who generally know the congregation, they will come up with a list of people, and you'd be surprised at how similar the lists are, working on their own.
And also there are sometimes some amazing surprises, and I've experienced that in the congregations and when I was the dean of the seminary that I served, as others in this consortium of endowed parishes have. And that is a person who may have had a fairly not as close a relationship or a leadership relation in a congregation, but there comes a moment of either in capital or annual giving where there is something of a faith awareness and a capacity that the general congregants weren't aware of, and that has to do with the culture and the general nature of parish life, so that there's always that opportunity for the gift that you didn't expect, which can be of major importance.
Jim, that is a really, really good point. And I want to, another thing I'd like to say about this along these lines is you really can't judge true potential by what people give annually. You know, we looked at this. I remember 30 years ago, we talked about how do people give how do they give annually, or how do they give to capital in relationship to annual? And there is no correlation whatsoever. Sadly, there are a lot of firms out there that think that the larger or the higher pledges annually will dictate who's going to make the larger gifts in the capital campaign. And the real fallacy of that is, most rectors fall into that larger because they're through tithing. And so you see that. And on the reverse of that, we have gotten countless $500,000 pledges, $1 million pledges, even more, from people who weren't even in the top 50% of giving annually. So, Jim, you're exactly right. I mean, there are a lot of surprises out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let me see. There are lots of really great chats back and forth. What suggestions do you have for making stewardship a year-round concept, not just about the annual campaign? I really look at the annual campaign is just the exercise. It's really only the exercise in your annual ministries. The annual ministries go on year-round, and hopefully people give. But I think that most of you. I think most of you see that, there a lot of people give at the end of the year, that for tax purposes, they want to go ahead and hurry up and get their gifts in before Christmas. There may be a lot of them that give right after tax time. Typically, January might be a little bit slow. So it's kind of all over the place. But I think it goes back to communication. What are we doing to keep them engaged? Because if the only thing that we do is talk about our annual ministries and giving is in the last quarter of the year, I just don't think that's enough. I really don't. And along those same lines, go ahead, Jim.
It's also not great theology, to be honest about it, because I know we did a project when I was at Christ Church, where we did our entire Lenten writing and around generosity, in fact. And that led then to think of each liturgical season as a way of proclaiming generosity, of how God's generosity works. And that's reflected in one way in Easter, and another in Christmastide, and another in Lent, and another on Pentecost. And it's part of the theological and preaching and teaching and spiritual life of the congregation to interpret generosity at every season of the year, both God's generosity and the great potential of human generosity that God's given us.
Mm-hmm. Jim, there's a question here. Can you speak how we can include regular guests to our video worship services during the remote worship times in our stewardship ask? One thing I would like to say is that before COVID-19, members were coming into the church from your surrounding area. Now, many of you have members that would drive an hour to come on into church, maybe more. And today, almost everything is done online. Well, you know what this has done? This has really leveled the playing field for every church. So if you're in Des Moines, Iowa, if you're out there and you have a great, worship services online, you can reach out everywhere. As a matter of fact, I regularly participate in a daily prayer from a church in Sarasota. Father Charleston Wilson, a good friend of mine, and I enjoy it so much. Well, this is a great opportunity, and I think I'm on Facebook, and I'm able to jump in and listen to prayers all during the week. So this is a wonderful opportunity to reach out, not just to our own members, but everybody in our community, and really all over the country. I think it's, that's an opportunity that I think we should be looking at, is reaching out to Christians all over the country now and beyond. We go through. Well, there have been some good ones here. Increase of 3 to 4% of income this past year. So there have been a lot. There really are a tremendous number. Let's see. Thank you very much. Lots of really nice, lot of nice comments. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Also, using bar graphs instead of the pie charts. I think all of those things, I think, can be very helpful. Very good.
Yes,
all right.
We're a lot of visual learners in that way, and it can be very helpful, as can the things that show the urgency of the moment and the possibility of the moment. Some of the research that I've been talking about actually has some great presentations that, and I've used with a few congregations in our consortium of endowed parishes, because my consultation over the years has been in kind of spirituality of stewardship and congregational development and leadership education. And so I've worked with a lot of our congregations and congregations in other ways too. And that which can be directly, simply, and visually presented out of a whole range of the learning related to this really is engaging for people. And those can be pie charts and bar graphs and other modes, because people, as they become more alert to the moment, also become more alert to their own both responsibility and opportunity for giving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have a question. Are you available for seat, or are only available to seat clients? No, we're not. We've worked with a lot of the seat parishes, and we're really happy about it. We love seat, but we actually do work in all different denominations. Most of us happen to be Episcopalians, and so we do a lot of work in the Episcopal Church. But we're available for anyone, and so we're very happy to help. And I'm always eager to offer advice and counsel. And Jim does a lot of different kinds of consulting as well, and specifically for churches that may be in crisis and maybe leadership transitions, things like that, right, Jim?
Yes. And part of the gift of the Lilly Endowment through the years has been that of focusing on a whole wide range of matters, but particularly how leaders lead most effectively. That's some of the work that's going right now in major initiatives. And that's part of the work that I am honored to do and employ. I might say that although I have a professional foundation address at the foundation I serve, but if you want to get in contact with me, the easiest way to do that is simply jamesblemler@gmail.com. And the conversations I learned so much and have over these years of work with organizations like Jim's and various institutions in the church, but also with congregations about leadership and giving and the opportunity for development, of which there's great opportunity for congregational development at this moment. And some of it, oddly enough, is being made both necessary but also possible by the present COVID moment and even the issues of justice and life that we have and witness as churches. So James B. Lemler at gmail.com is very easy.
Excellent, excellent. And I know we're actually over our scheduled time, but I just wanted to say thank you for all of the very kind comments. Very happy to help any way that we can, and please let us know. Maybe we can ask Joe and Kim if they would also give out our contact information with any follow-up, so that people can reach us directly. But my company website, and we have lots of information on there as well, is just jdklote.com, www.jdklote.com. And I'm happy to help speak with any of you, any churches, especially getting through this very difficult time. Jim, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being involved in this. I'm grateful to you as my friend, and you're just a wealth of information and your experience. There really aren't that many. You joked around about that actually knew Mr. Lilly, but I'll tell you, having that experience, there's just no one that has your experience. So I want to thank you for all of this.
You're very kind, Jim, and our association through the years and work in many different ways has been of importance and profit, literally, to my soul and also to the good of the church, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay, well, I guess we just sign off. What we'll do is, if any more questions come up, or there are questions that we did not address, Joe said that we would be getting a transcript of it, and then I'll be happy to email anyone with any of my thoughts or suggestions as we all move forward. We're all in this together, as everyone keeps saying, and we're here to help as much as we can. So thank you all very much, and everybody just stay healthy and safe during these challenging times.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.